Welcome back to Where the Red Fern Grows Read Aloud. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 8. Yesterday we finished up Chapter 7 and Billy was training his two hounds how to coon hunt. And he felt that he had successfully accomplished that by training them, and hunting season is just ahead, so hopefully Chapter 8 has a little insight about that. All right, so here we go with Chapter 8. The day hunting season opened, I was as nervous as Sammy, our house cat. Part of the seemingly ending day was spent getting things ready for the coming night. I cleaned my lantern and filled it up with fuel. With hog lard, I greased my boots until they were as soft as hummingbird nests. I was grinding my axe when Papa came around. He smiled and said, "This is the big night, isn't it?" "It sure is, Papa," I said. "I've been waiting a long time for it." "Yes, I know," he said. "I've been thinking there's not too much to do around here during the hunting season. I'm pretty sure I can take care of things, so you just go ahead and you hunt all you want to." Papa said, "Thanks, Papa," I said. I guess I'll be out pretty late at night, and I'll probably have to do a lot of sleeping in the daytime." Papa started frowning. "You know," he said, "your mother doesn't like this hunting of yours very much. She's worried about you being all by yourself." "I can't see why Mama has to worry," I said. "Haven't I been roaming the woods ever since I was big enough to walk? And I'm almost 14 now." "I know," Papa said. "It's all right with me, but women are a little different than men. They worry more. Now, just to be on the safe side, I think it would be a good idea for you to tell us where you'll be hunting. Then, if anything happens, we'll know where to look." I told him I would, but I didn't think anything was going to happen. After Papa had left, I started thinking, he doesn't even talk to me like I was a boy anymore. He talks to me like I'm a man, like I was a man. These wonderful thoughts made me feel just about as big as our old red mule. I had a good talk with my dogs. "I've waited almost 3 years for this night," I said, "and it hasn't been easy. I taught you everything I know, and I want you to do your best." Little Ann acted like she understood. She whined and saved me a wash job on my face. Oh, she saved me a good wash job on my face. Do we know what that is implying? That means the girl dog, Little Ann, is licking his face. Old Dan may have, but he didn't act like it. He just laid there in the sunshine, all stretched out and limber as a rag. During supper, Mama asked me where I was going to hunt. "I'm not going far," I said, "just down the river." I could tell Mama was worried, and it didn't make me feel too good. "Billy," she said, "I don't approve of this hunting, but it looks like I can't say no, not after all you've been through. Getting your dogs and your training." I'll be all right, Papa." "Oh, he'll be all right," Papa said. "Besides, he's getting to be a good-sized man now." "Man?" Mama explained. "Why, he's still just a little boy." "You can't keep him a little boy always," Papa said. He's got to grow up someday." "I know," Mama said, "but I don't like it. Not at all. I can't help worrying." "Mama, please don't worry about me," I said. "I'll be all right. Why, I've been all over these hills. You know that." "I know," she said, "but that was in the daytime. I never worried too much when it was daytime. But at night, that's different. It'll be dark and anything could happen." "There won't be anything happening," I said. "I promise I'll be careful." Mama got up from the table saying, "Well, it's like I said, I can't say no. I can't help worrying. I'll pray every night you're out." The way Mama had me feeling, I didn't know whether to go hunting or not. Papa must have sensed how I felt. "It's dark now," he said, "and I understand these coons start stirring pretty early. You had better be going, hadn't you?" While Mama was bundling me up, Papa lit my lantern. He handed it to me, saying, "I'd like to see a big coon on the smokehouse wall in the morning." The whole family followed me out on the porch. There was a good surprise. My dogs were sitting on the steps waiting for me. I heard Papa laugh. Why? They know you're going hunting, he said. Know it as well as anything. Well, I never, said Mama. Do you really think they do? It does look like they do. Why? Just look at them. Little Ann started wiggling and twisting. Old Dan trotted to the gate, stopped, turned around, and looked at me. Sure they do. Sure they know Billy's going hunting, piped the little one. And I know why. How do you know how much? How do you know so much, silly? Asked the oldest one. Because I told little Ann, that's why, she said. And she told old Dan, that's how they know. We all had to laugh at her. The last thing I heard as I left the house was the voice of my mother. Be careful, Billy, she said, and don't stay out late. It was a beautiful night, still and foggy. A big grinning Ozark moon had a countryside bathed in the soft yellow glow. The starlit heaven reminded me of a large blue umbrella outspread with the handle broken off. Just before I reached the timber, I called my dogs to me. Now the trail will be a little different tonight, I whispered. I won't be a hide dragged on the ground. It'll be a real thing. So remember everything I taught you, and I'm depending on you. Just put one up the tree and I'll do the rest. I turned them loose, saying, go get them. They striked for the timber. By the time I reached the river, every nerve in my body was drawn up as tight as a fiddle string, big-eyed and with ears open. I walked on, stopping now and then to listen. The way I was sliding along, anyone would have thought I was trying to slip up on the coon myself. I had never seen a night so peaceful and still. All around me, the sacraments gleamed like a white streamer in the moonlight, and prowling skunks came wobbling up the riverbank. He stopped when he saw me. I smiled at the foxfire glow of his small, beady red eyes. He turned and disappeared in the underbush. I heard a sharp snap of the feathers rustle in some brush close by. A small rodent started squealing in agony. Agony means like they're suffering. A nighthawk had found his supper. Across the river and from the far back in the rugged mountains, I heard a baying of a hound. I wondered if it was the same one I had heard from my window on those nights so long ago. Although my eyes were seeing the wonder of night, my ears were ever alert, listening for the sound of my hounds telling me that they had found a trail. I was expecting one of them to bawl, but when it came, it startled me. The deep tones of old Dan's voice jarred the silence around me. I dropped my axe and almost dropped my lantern. A strange feeling came over me. I took a deep breath, threw back my head to give the call of the hunter, but something went wrong. My throat felt like it had been tied in a knot. I swallowed a couple of times and the knot disappeared. As loud as I could, I whooped, woo-wee! Get him, Dan, get him. Little Ann came. In a bell-like tone of her voice made shivers run up and down my spine. I whooped to her. Woo-wee! Tell it to him, little girl. Tell it to him. Then was what I had prayed for, worked and sweat for. My own little hounds bawling on the trail of a river coon. I don't know why I cried, but I did. While the tears rolled, I whooped again and again. Straightened the tail out and headed down the river. I took off after as fast as I could run. A mile downstream, a coon pulled his first trick. I could tell by my dog's voice that they had lost the trail. When I came to them, they were out on an old drift sniffing around. The coon had pulled a simple trick. He had run out on the drift, leaped into the water, and crossed the river. To an experienced coonhound, the crude trick would have been nothing at all. But my dogs were just big, awkward pups, trailing for their first live coon. I stood and watched, wondering if they would remember the training I had given them. Now and then I could whoop, urging on them. Old Dan was having a fit. He whined and he bawled, he whimpered and cried. He came to me and reared up, begging for help. I'm not going to help you, I squalled. And you're not going to find him out on the drift. If you would remember some of your training I gave you, you would find the trail. Now go find the coon. He ran back to the drift and started searching. Little Ann came to me. I could see her pleading in her warm gray eyes. I'm ashamed of you, little girl, I said. I thought you had more sense than this. If you let him fool you this easily, you'll never be a coon dog. She whined, turned, and trotted downstream to search again for the lost trail. I couldn't understand. Had all the training I'd given these been useless? I knew if I had watered the river, they would follow me. Once on the other side, it would be easy for them to find the trail. I didn't want it this way. I wanted them to figure it out themselves. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. I sat down and buried my face in my arms. Out on the drift, old Dan started whining and made me angry. I got up and scolded him again. I couldn't understand his actions. He was running along the edge of the drift, whimpering and staring downstream. I looked that way. I could see something swimming for the opposite shore. At first, I thought it was a muskrat. In the middle of the stream, where the moonlight was the brightest, I got a good look. It was little Ann. With a loud whoop, I told her how proud I was. My little girl had remembered her training. She came out from the gravel bar, shook the water from her body, and disappeared in the thick timber. Minutes later, she let me know she had found the trail. Before the tone of her voice had died away, old Dan plowed into the water. He was so eager to join her, I could hear him whining as he swam. As soon as his feet touched the bottom of the shallow, he started bawling and lunging. White sheets of water knocked high in the moonlight as his churning feet gleamed like thousands of tiny white stars. He came out from the river into the sandbar. In his eagerness, his feet slipped in the loose sand and down he went. He came out and rolled, running and bawling. Ahead of him was a long log jam. He sailed over it and disappeared into the riverbank. Seconds later, I heard his deep voice blend with the sharp cries of little Ann. At that moment, no boy in the world could have been more proud of his dogs than I was. Never again would I have doubted him. I was hurrying along looking for the shallow riffle so I could wade across. When the voice of my dog stopped, I waited and listened. Then again, they opened again on the side of the stream. The coon had crossed back. I couldn't help smiling. I knew that happened again, right? I knew that would never happen again. Would a ringtail fool them by swimming the river? The next trick the old yeller pulled was dandy. He climbed the large water oak standing about 10 feet from the river and simply disappeared. I got there in time to see my dogs swimming for the opposite shore. For half an hour, they worked the bank. Not finding the trail, they swam back. I stood and watched them. They practically tore the riverbank to pieces looking for the trail. Old Dan knew the coon had climbed the water oak. He went back, reared up on it, and bawled a few times. There was no use in doing that, boy, I said. I know he climbed it, but he's not there now. Maybe like Grandpa said, he just climbed right out of right on out through the top and disappeared in the stars. My dog didn't know it, but I was pretty well convinced that that was the coon had done. They never gave up. Once again, they crossed over and on the other shore. It was no use. The coon hadn't touched the riverbank. They came back. Old Dan went up the river and little Ann worked downstream. About an hour and a half later, they gave up and came to me begging for help. I kneeled down between them, their wet bodies. While I scratched and petted them, I let them know I still love them. I'm not mad, I said. I know you did your best. If the coon can fool both of us, then we're just beat. We'll go someplace else and hunt. Well, he's not the only coon here, coon in these bottoms. Just as I picked up my axe and lantern, little Ann let out a bawl and tore out down the riverbank. Old Dan, with a bewildered look on his face, stood for a moment after her. Then, raising his head high in the air, he made an eardrum ring with his deep voice. I could hear the underneath popping as he rang and joined her. I couldn't figure out what had taken place. Surely little Ann had heard or seen something. I could tell by her voice and whatever it was they were after, they were close enough to see it and probably running by sight. The animal left the bottom and headed for the mountains. Whatever it was, it must have realized my dogs were crowding it closely. At the edge of the foothill, it turned and came back toward the river. I was still trying to figure out what was going on when I realized that on striking the river, the animal had turned around and was coming straight towards me. I set my lantern down, tightened my grip on my axe. I was standing my ground quite well when visions of bears, lions, and all kinds of other animals started flashing across my mind. I jumped behind the big sycamore and was trying hard to press my body into the tree when a big coon came tearing by. 25 yards behind him came my dogs running side by side. I saw them clearly when they passed me, bawling every time their feet touched the ground. After seeing that there was nothing to be scared of, once again I was the fearless hunter, screaming and yelling as loud as I could. Get him, boy, get him! I tore after them. The trails I knew so well were forgotten. I took straight off through the brush. I was tearing my way through the elders when the voices of my dogs stopped. Holding my breath, I stood still and waited. Then it came across a long drawn out bawl from the tree bark. My little hounds had done it. They had treed their first coon. When I came to them, I saw that they had done what they had done. I was speechless. I groaned and closed my eyes. I didn't want to believe it. There were a lot of big sycamores in the bottom, but the one in which my dogs had treed was the giant of all. While prowling the woods, I had seen the big tree many times. I always stopped and admired it, like the king of its own domain in a tower far above the smaller trees. It had taken me quite a while to find the name suitable for the big sycamores. For a while, I called it the chicken tree. In some way, it had reminded me of my mother hen hoovering over her young in the rainstorm. A huge limb spread over the small birch, ashes, box elders, and water oaks, as if it alone were their protector. Next, I named it the giant. The name didn't last long. Mama told us children the story about the giant that lived in the mountains and ate little children that were lost. Right away, I started looking for another name. One day, lying in the warm sun, staring in the magnificent beauty, I found a perfect name. From that day on, it was called the Big Tree. I named the bottoms around it, the Big Tree bottoms. Walking around it and using the moon as a light, I started looking for the coon. High up in the top, I saw a hollow in the end of the broken limb. I figured that was where the coon's den was. I climbed almost any tree. I could climb almost any tree I had ever seen, but I knew I would never climb the big sycamore, as it would take days to chop it down. There had been very little hope for the beginning, but on seeing the hollow, I gave up. Come on, I said to the dogs, there's nothing I could do. We'll go someplace else and find another coon. I turned and walked away. My hounds made no move to follow. They started whining. Old Dan reared up, placed his front paws on the trunk, and started bawling. I know he's there, I said, but there's nothing I could do. I can't climb it. Why? It's 60 feet up to the first limb, and it would take me a month to cut it down. Again, I turned and started on my way. Little Ann came to me. She reared up and started licking my hand, swallowing the knot in my throat. I said, I'm sorry, little Ann. I'm sorry, little girl. I want him just as badly as you do, but there's no way I could get him. She ran back to the tree and started digging in the soft ground close to the root. Come now, I said in a gruff voice. You're both acting silly. You know I can't get the coon for you I can't get the coon. You know I'd get the coon for you if I could, but I can't. With a whipped dog look on her face, with her tail between her legs, little Ann came over. She couldn't even look at me. Old Dan walked slowly around behind the tree and hid himself. He peeped around the large trunk and looked at me. The message I read in his friendly eyes tore my heart. He seemed to be saying, you told us to put one in a tree and you'd do the rest. With tears in my eyes, I looked again at the big sycamore. I waved of anger came over me. Gritting my teeth, I said, I don't care how big you are. I'm not going to let my dogs down. I told them if they put a coon in the tree, I would do the rest. And I'm going to cut you down. I don't care if it takes me a whole year. I walked over, sank my axe in the deep as I could, and soothed in the smooth white bark. My dogs threw a fit. Little Ann started turning in circles. I could hear her pleased, whimpering cry. Old Dan bawled and started growling at the big tree's trunk. At first, it was easy. My axe was sharp, and the chips flew. 2 hours later, things were different. My arms felt like 2 dead grapevines, and my back felt like something had pulled a plug out of one end of it and drained all the sap out. While taking a breather, I saw I was making more progress than I thought I would. I cut it. The cut I had started was a foot deep, but I still had a long way to go. Sitting on their rears, my dogs waited and watched. I smiled, and I smiled at the look on their face. Every time I stopped Chomp, they would come over. Little Ann washed the sweat from my face. Old Dan would inspect my work. He seemed to be pleased with what he saw, for he always wagged his tail. Along the daylight, I got my second wind, and it really did make the chips fly. The burst of energy cost me dearly. By sunup, I was so stiff I could barely move. My hands and arms were numb. That means all night he started axing away at this tree, this huge giant tree. Where was I? Oh, my hands and knees. I was slumped and I was so stiff I could hardly move. My hands and arms were numb. My back screamed with pain. I could go no further. Sitting down, I leaned back against the big tree and fell asleep. Little Ann woke me up by washing my face. I groaned with the torture of getting to my feet. Every muscle of my body seemed to be tied in a knot. I was thinking of going down the river and washing my face with the cool water when I heard a loud whoop. I recognized my father's voice. I whooped to let him know where I was. Papa was riding our red mule. After he rode up and he just sat there and looked me over. He glanced at my dogs and at the big Sagamore. I saw the worry leave his face. He straightened his shoulders, pursed his lips, and blew out a little air. He reminded me of someone who had just dropped a heavy load. In the slow, calm voice, he asked, Are you all right, Billy? Yes, Papa, I said. Oh, I'm a little tired and sleepy. Otherwise, I'm fine. He slid from the mule's back and came over. Your mother's worried, he said. When you didn't come in, we didn't know what had happened. You should have come home. I didn't know what to say. I bowed my head and looked at the ground. I was trying hard to choke back the tears when I felt his hand on my shoulder. I'm not scolding, he said. We just thought maybe you had an accident or something. I looked up and saw a smile on his face. He turned and looked again at the tree. Say, he said, this is the Sagamore you called the big tree, isn't it? I nodded my head. Is there a coon in there? He asked. There sure is, Papa, I said. He is in the hollow limb. See, that one way up there. That's why I couldn't come home. I was afraid he'd get away. Maybe you just think he's there, Papa said. I believe I'd make sure before you cut down a tree that big. Oh, he's there all right, I said. My dogs were 10 feet behind him when he went up there. Why are you so determined to get the coon? Papa asked. Couldn't you go somewhere else and tree one? Maybe the tree would be a smaller one. I thought about it, Papa, I said, but I made a bargain with my dogs. I told them if they would put up one in the tree, I'd do the rest. Well, they fulfilled their part of the bargain. Now it's up to me to do my part, and I'm going to, Papa. I'm going to cut down the tree. I don't care if it takes me a year. Papa laughed and said, oh, I think it'll take that long. But it will take a while. I tell you what I'll do. You take the mule and go get some breakfast. I'll chop on it until you get back. No, Papa, I said. I want to help. I wanted to cut it down all by myself. You see, if someone helps, I wouldn't feel like I kept my part of the agreement. An astonished look came over my father's face. Why, Billy, he said, you can't stay down here without anything to eat and sleep. Besides, it'll take you at least 2 days to cut the tree down and that's hard work. Please, Papa, I begged. Don't make me quit. I just have to get the coon. If I don't, my dogs won't believe in me ever again. Papa didn't know what to tell me. He scratched his head, looked over at my dogs and back at me. He started walking around. I waited for him to make up his mind. He finally reached a decision. Well, all right, he said. If that's the way you want it, I'm for it, even if it's only an agreement between you and your dogs. If a man's word isn't any good, he's no good himself. That is a very good phrase right there. I might have to mark that. I'm going to mark it right now. And I'm going to reread it. If a man's word isn't any good, he's no good himself. Now, I have to get back and tell your mother that you're all right. In a sense, you can't do that kind of work on an empty stomach. I'll send your older sister down here with a lunch bucket. With the tears in my eyes, I said, tell Mama I'm sorry for not coming home last night. Don't you worry about your mother, he said, as he climbed back on the mule's back. I'll take care of her. Another thing, I have to make a trip to the store today, and I'll take this over with your grandfather. He may be able to help in some way. After Papa left, things were a little different. The tree didn't look as big, and my axe wasn't as heavy. I even managed to sing a little as I chopped away. When my sisters came back with a lunch bucket, I could have kissed her, but I didn't. She took one look at the big tree with her blue eyes and got as big as a guinea's egg. You're crazy, she grasps. Absolutely crazy. Why? It'll take months to cut a tree down. And all for an old coon? I was so busy with the fresh side pork, fried eggs, and hot biscuits, I didn't pay any attention to her. After all, she was a girl, and girls don't think like boys do. She raved on, you can't possibly cut it down today. And what are you going to do when it gets dark? I'm going to keep right on chopping, I said. I'll stay here. I stayed with it last night, didn't I? Well, I'll stay till it's cut down. I don't care how long it takes. My sister got upset. She looked at me threw back her small head and looked up at the top of the big sycamore. You're as crazy as a bedbug, she said. Why, I never heard such a thing. She stepped over in the front of me and looked and very seriously asked if she could look in my eyes. Look in my eyes, I said. What do you want to do that for? I'm not sick. Yes, you are, Billy, she said. Very sick. Mama said the old man Johnson went crazy. His eyes turned green. I want to see if yours have. This was too much. If you don't get out of here, I shouted, you're going to be red instead of green. And I mean it. I grabbed up a stick and started towards her. Of course, I wouldn't have hit her for anything. This scared her, and she started for the house. I heard her saying something about an old coon as she disappeared in the underbush. Down on the bottom of my lunch bucket, I found a neat little package of scrapes for my dogs. While they were eating, I walked down to the spring and filled the bucket with cool water. The food did wonders for me. My strength came back. I spit on my hand and whistled a coon hunter's tune. I started making the chips fly. The cut grew so big I could have laid down in it. I moved over on another side and started a new one. Once in a while I was taking a rest. Old Dan came over to inspect my work. He hopped up in the cut and sniffed around. You better get out of there, I said. If that tree takes a notion to fall, it'll smash you flatter than a tadpole's tail. With a no-care look on his friendly face, he gave me a hurry-up signal with his wag of his tail. Little Ann had dug a bed in a pile of dead leaves. She looked as if she were asleep, but I knew she wasn't. Every time I stopped swinging the axe, she raised her head and looked at me. A very long but interesting chapter 8. Tomorrow we'll read chapter 9. Billy and his 2 hounds had captured a coon. So he started hunting season. Hunting season opened up. Very exciting. This is his first hunting season. Mama is extremely worried. As a woman, as a mother, I could understand where she's coming from. And Billy, once again, is showing his determination. He's showing his persistence. Very good characteristics of a young boy. We'll see tomorrow if the tree, the big giant tree gets knocked down, and if he catches his big coon. All right, so thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 9.